Snow squeaked under boots as men crowded the wooden bridge at Bannock. Lanterns swung in the wind, throwing light across the gallows beams. A rope creaked. Somewhere down the creek a coyote barked. On the platform stood Sheriff Henry Plummer. Clean coat, fine gloves, a face that looked more tired than afraid. He had arrested men here. Tonight he was the prisoner. Buck Stinson and Ned Ray, his deputies, waited their turn. It was January 10th, 1864. The rope was the only law the camp trusted. To understand how a badge ended up under a noose, you have to backtrack to a summer that hit like a stampede. In May 1863, a party of prospectors rolled into the gulches southeast of present-day Dillon and found gold along a narrow run of water. Alder Gulch exploded into a chain of boom towns: Nevada City, Virginia City, Central, Highland, tarp roofs, raw boards, canvas, and more dust than a man could cough through. Thousands flooded in from the Salmon River diggings and Salt Lake trails, all elbows and shovels and need. Idaho Territory claimed the region, but its courts were 1,000 miles of mountain and winter away. Miners' meetings did what they could, arguing over claims and boundaries under the open sky. For everything else, luck and fear filled the gap. Freighters working the roads between the Gulch and Salt Lake City began to vanish. Lone travelers were found with their throats cut, or not found at all. Wagons were hit on bad corners where brush hid the draw of a revolver. Robbers, road agents, they were called, seemed always to know who carried dust and where a man would make camp. Rumors hardened into names. A tight crew, people said. A sign scratched into door frames. Whispered handshakes. They had a leader too, though the leader's name depended on who you asked. Some said the sheriff. Plummer had the makings of a split legend. He was quick to a smile, careful with words, and better dressed than most. He'd drifted north from California and Idaho with a record stuck to him like burrs, an old manslaughter case out west. A later shooting, he said, was self-defense. By the fall of 1863, he'd won the sheriff's post at Bannock and courted a woman in town. To his friends, he kept the peace in a rough camp. To his enemies, he was the quiet engineer of a gang that bled miners on the roads. Fear needed a spark big enough to turn into resolve. It came in December. George Ives, a hard case with a reputation to match his eyes, was seized for the murder of a young immigrant named Nicholas Thibault. Miners put Ives on trial under the sky at Nevada City. Hundreds ringed the clearing, rifles across their knees, as lawyers improvised a court of planks and barrels. Testimony ran 2 days. On December 21st, the jury, 12 miners chosen on the spot, voted to hang. The rope went over a beam and Ives swung while a brass band, hired for a dance, struck up a hymn. The crowd watched the last kick of his boots and then went home feeling like a line had been crossed and could be crossed again. Within days, a vigilance committee formed in secret. Men swore oaths by lamplight, elected a captain, James Williams, and set up riders to shadow the trails. Their symbol, 3-7-77, would later appear chalked on doors as a warning, though what the numbers meant, no one could agree. Grave dimensions, a Masonic jab, a code from a miners' meeting. Take your pick. Whatever the truth, the message landed. Leave by sundown or be carried out. In early January, the Vigilantes moved with a speed the courts could not. They split into posses and took to the roads. At Bannock, they seized Stinson and Ray, the sheriff's close men, after a witness tied them to staged robberies. At the jail, they found Plummer himself and marched him out under guns. He protested, said he had marched hard against the road agents for months, that the thieves used his name to hide their own. Another man swore Plummer had begged him to join the gang. Each side had a story, and the storm gave them only minutes to settle it. On January 10th, the three were hanged at Bannock, the crowd packed tight along the bridge. Plummer, they said, asked for time to pray. He asked them to "Give me a chance." The rope answered. Over the next days and weeks, the committee fanned out. At Virginia City, a batch of prisoners went to the gallows in a row. Boone Helm, trail killer, braggart, and by rumor, a cannibal. Jack Gallagher, Frank Parrish, Hayes Lyons, and clubfoot George Lane. Elsewhere, they caught Red Yeager and Dutch John, men with road agent reputations as red as their nicknames. Some were hauled from cabins in the night. Some were taken from the saddle with a short noose already tied. The list ends around 20 to 21, 22, depending on who counted and who you believed. The killings stopped. Stage drivers ran the routes with both eyes open, but with less of the certain dread that had knotted the trails. Merchants exhaled. The gulch went back to the noisy business of gold and winter. In May 1864, Congress split the map and named a new Montana territory, with judges, marshals, and paper-stamped order to follow. By then, the vigilantes were either back behind their counters or famous enough to be quoted. Thomas Dimsdale, schoolteacher editor of the Montana Post, published a book the next year that dressed the story like a banner. Plummer as arch-villain, the road agents as a secret order of murderers, the vigilantes as stern custodians of the public good. People bought the book. The version stuck. But the older the story got, the less clean it looked. Historians picking through diaries and court papers found smoke where Dimsdale reported fire. Had Plummer actually commanded a gang, or had a frightened camp grabbed the easiest target and declared the question answered? Several of the hanged men were vicious by any measure. Boone Helm spared no one his boasts. Others look thinner under the light of time. Rumors harden fast in small towns. Stand under a gallows beam with a crowd chanting for speed, and the difference between proof and fear can shorten to a single nod. The symbol 3-7-77 kept showing up in later years, painted on shacks in Helena, scribbled on notes warning strangers to leave, long after the first crisis was over. The vigilance habit, once taught, proved hard to unlearn. It worked until it didn't. Threats meant to scare out desperados were also used on drunks, gamblers, union men, anyone who fit the word undesirable. By then, the territory had judges and juries, and the old excuse, no law, no time, rang less true. Vigilantism had drifted from emergency to tradition, and tradition can grow teeth of its own. Walk Bannock today and the wind does most of the talking. The plank sidewalks are gray. The hotel stands empty, windows dark as closed eyes. You can cross the old bridge and look up at the beams where Plummer swung and try to hear which version of the story is right. Maybe he ran a road agent ring from the sheriff's office, moving the pieces with a chess player's calm. Maybe he tried to hold down a camp boiling over and lost to panic thickened by whiskey and snow. The West leaves room for both kinds of truth. The heroic tale towns want to tell themselves, and the quieter one where good men and bad men share the same street and nothing separates them but the weather and a vote. What is certain is the effect. After the hangings, travel grew safer. Gold moved. Towns took root, and the idea that neighbors could fix danger faster than judges did not leave Montana when the gold did. It would surface again, sometimes to good, sometimes to trouble, a reminder that order on the frontier was born messy. Justice came, but it came with calloused hands and a knot in the rope. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.